Let's move on to chapter 2, season 2 of the Tommy West era. Better season because he was 61st in the nation after season 1, 94. 5-6, didn't go to a bowl game. Had some great players. Now, you say the cupboard was empty, but still had Brian Dawkins, still had Dexter McLean, still had Nealon Green, still had Patrick Sapp, still had Priester, Pegues. I mean, he had Tony Horn. I mean, he's got these guys. So I'm just saying. I mean, I know.
You're not saying. You're just saying.
I'm not just saying. I'm just JSing. But follow it up with the 95 season. They went 8-4 and didn't have that good of a bowl game. We'll talk about that later. But 27th overall at the end of the year. For me, I'll lead it off, Al. Yep. Best player. I didn't give him the best player his junior year. I'm going to give him the best player his senior year. Do I think it had anything to do with Tommy West? I don't think so. But Brian Dawkins, 6 interceptions, 724 snaps for the Tigers. So I'm picking him as far as, and then again, this is Clemson 1995. So this is world champion Atlanta Braves year. All right, this is how far back we are right now. Yeah. Crazy. But Nealon Green is a starter there. Raymond Priester had a great year, over 1,300 yards rushing, almost 1,400 yards from scrimmage total. Emory Smith had a great year rushing. Dawkins, Evans, and the Ford brothers, Patrick Sapp, Andre Carter, Dexter McLeon, all guys still on the team there. When I'm looking at the roster, let's look over at ClemsonTigers.com. The depth chart got Bundren, left tackle, Will Young, left guard, Trevor Putnam, center, Glenn Roundtree, right guard, Dwayne Morgan, right tackle, Lamont Hall. Lamont Hall is a tight end that went to the NFL, so big-time tight end guy right there. Kenya Crooks, Tony Horn, both playing the split-end position. Nealon Green, quarterback. Raymond Priester, Lamont Pegues, and Antoine Wyatt, flanker, and Steve Suave. I don't know. Place kicker.
Suave sounded a lot cooler. I mean, it's like Joe Dierte.
Let's go with Suave. And then on defense, you had Patrick Sapp, Lamerick Simpson, Carlos Curry, Marvin Cross, Lamont Evans, Mond Wilson, Ande McCrory, Dexter McLeon, Brian Dawkins, Andre Carter, Andre Humphrey, and Kevin Laird. Kevin Laird, I believe, went in the NFL as well as a punter. So just throwing that out there. There's a lot of guys on here give some props to for going to the NFL and playing a lot, really. So definitely a team, like I said, we want to give props to these guys because they played in a Tiger uniform. For me, though, that year, McLeon had a good year. I believe this was next year. Okay, I'm going to hold off. I got another player that I want to talk about real bad, but next year. And then as far as best win is the opposite of best loss from last year, or worst loss, excuse me. South Carolina, they beat South Carolina 38-17. Steve Tannehill wanted to win so bad because it would have been 3 out of 4 years that he beat the Tigers. However, the Tigers ended up beating him on his senior year, and he finished that game with the towel over his head in just total embarrassment for not beating the Tigers. And I thought that was a fitting end to him because the sense that, he's a sad guy with a towel over his head like Cam Newton over here after the previous year dancing on the tiger paw. I thought that was a fitting end for him. This also, Al, special note, was the first year the Panthers also played in Death Valley. So at the Hill end zone was a Clemson painting, or for the end zone. And on the other end zone, next to West end zone, was the Panthers painting. So you had Clemson and the Panthers on the same field. So as you're watching these games, you they score a touchdown and it's like a Panthers helmet logo in the corner. So it's kind of interesting to see that scoring, and then it's like Carolina blue and black, Yeah. And the worst loss for me is the Syracuse game, that bowl game that I was talking about.
Yeah.
That was against Donovan McNabb in the Gator Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
It was pouring down rain. They lost 41-0. McNabb threw for 309 yards and 3 touchdowns in the pouring rain against them. Yeah. And this was after, I believe, the Tigers won 5 games in a row, go to the bowl game and just get destroyed. And I'm thinking, That is the stinger for sure.
Yeah, and look, I don't know whether I was, checking out the comments over here, or whether you pulled a Morgan and didn't actually get to it. But did you say your best player on offense?
My best player on offense, I didn't
I
really
heard
do that.
defense.
I didn't really do that. On defense, I said Brian Dawkins.
Right. So
So
that would stand to reason that you would also have an offensive player, right?
on offense, I guess I will give it to. Okay,
Uh-oh. I
I'm
made
gonna.
him think.
I'm trying not to give it to the same person twice. This is
Uh-oh. See, I didn't follow those rules.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to give it to Nealon Green because Raymond Priester had a great year. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to give it to Priester next year in the 96 year. But Nealon Green, like I said, when you watch this guy, he's not a bad player. He was electric, could use his feet a lot, wasn't afraid to run with the ball, and could throw it down the field. Now, was he, super accurate? Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence accurate? I don't know. But and he was playing on a team that just basically liked to line up in the I formation and run every time. So that's another problem he had, is that I'm just thinking as I'm watching this guy, man, it would be nice to have him with Chad Morris, because I think it would have been nice to see Nealon Green in a spread offense.
Yeah, definitely. And I had their best win actually that year at Georgia Tech. They won 24-3. I kind of looked at opposing teams' records and whether it was on the road or at home, that kind of thing. And so I came up with that Georgia Tech that year. Look, Georgia Tech didn't have a great record that year. They had a winning record, but they lost to some really good teams. They lost to number 17 Arizona, number 16 Virginia, number 1 FSU, all on the road, and they lost to Georgia. Okay, and they beat number 17 at the time, Maryland. So they had some tough losses to some really good teams, but so they were a pretty solid team. And they Tigers got a 24-3 victory on the road there, so that was their best win in my opinion. Worst loss, I'm right on board with you. Syracuse, when they got blown out in the bowl game. I mean, goodness gracious, you lose 41-0, that's your worst loss. Best player on offense, I actually again went with Antoine Wyatt. He had 45 receptions for 683 yards, and then he had I think he had 5 rushes for 34 yards. He had 5 touchdowns, so he was a solid overall player. I'm pretty sure I wasn't impressed enough with Nealon Green's quarterback numbers to give him kind of the go there. So, and I mean, look, it's a no-brainer. Brian Dawkins was the guy on defense that year, 6 interceptions and a touchdown. You definitely gave the best defensive player to him that year. I want to say I wrote a note somewhere about Nealon Green's quarterback stats, but I may have taken it. I may have taken it off. But anyways,
give him some props.
Look, he's mentioned down here somewhere in my notes down here, so we'll get to him. But for this year, I get Antoine Wyatt as offense and Brian Dawkins defense.
Well, okay, I like that. No, so I wouldn't have ever picked Georgia Tech game, so I'm glad that you picked that as the best game. I think that was, I think that was a good win for them there. So 95. Not a bad year. Like I said, they got to a bowl game. Really, 8-5 was the best that Tommy West was able to put together. Or excuse me, 8-4 was the best that Tommy West was able to put together. For me, though, best win, way better. I mean, I don't see how you could not play, put the win against South Carolina there. You got to go watch these games, Al. So if you go to Tiger TV on YouTube, he has from the 90s, he's posted with no commercials replays from 4 or 5 games every year. So it's pretty cool.
Right.
It's pretty cool to see. I didn't see any from 98 though. I don't know why. Maybe it's just that bad of a year. But again, like I said, this time Clemson Tigers going to a bowl game. They get destroyed, but around the same time, Atlanta Braves are winning the World Series. So everything's all good for me. I remember as a kid, this was kind of around the time I started remembering players more, but I still, for whatever reason, I know I went to these games with my dad. I do not remember Brian Dawkins actually playing on the field and being "Oh, that's him," But I know when I got watching the NFL, I was like, "Oh man, that's the guy who played for Clemson. That's awesome on the Eagles," Go figure, he was drafted in the 2nd round, so you don't have to be a first rounder to be 16-year Pro Bowl Hall of Famer.
Right.
You get picked anywhere. But got anything more for 95?
I'm good with 95. I think I didn't pick South Carolina, by the way, because they're 4-6 that year. So yeah, I was trying to give more credence.
They were 4-6, Al, because Clemson gave them the 6.